I'm Ella, 27, and I transformed from the family doormat to a successful financial advisor with my own firm. My wealthy parents raised me in luxury, but with constant emotional abuse. When I refused to sacrifice my future to bail them out financially, they called me street trash and threw me onto the street. What they never realized was that I'd been secretly managing their finances for years, and with one decision, I could cut off every bill they depended on to survive. Before I dive into my story, let me know where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you've ever had to stand up for yourself against family who took you for granted. Growing up in Highland Park, one of Chicago's most affluent suburbs, my childhood looked perfect from the outside. Our sprawling five-bedroom colonial, with its manicured lawn and heated pool, was the envy of many. My father, Robert, was a high-profile corporate attorney whose clients included celebrities and Fortune 500 companies. My mother, Vivian, was a socialite who spent her days planning charity galas and lunching with the wives of Chicago's elite. We had luxury cars, designer clothes, and took lavish vacations to destinations most people only dreamed about. But inside those perfectly painted walls, my reality was very different. From my earliest memories, I understood that my worth in my parents' eyes was tied exclusively to how well I reflected on them. There was no unconditional love, only a series of expectations that seemed to multiply with each passing year. "Stand up straight, Ella. No one will respect you if you slouch," my mother would hiss through her perfect smile as we entered another charity function where I was expected to perform like a trained seal, impressing adults with my politeness and poise. "Your math test was only 98%. What happened to the other 2%? My father would demand, not even looking up from his legal briefs when I proudly showed him my schoolwork. By age 7, I knew that tears were unacceptable, that expressing any negative emotion was a sign of weakness, and that Hamiltons don't air their dirty laundry in public. The appearance of perfection was everything. My mother scrutinized every pound I gained during puberty, restricted my food intake, and enrolled me in ballet classes I hated because no daughter of hers would be overweight. My father was physically present but emotionally absent, except when critiquing my academic performance or lecturing me about the importance of financial success. "Money is power, Ella," he told me on my 10th birthday, gifting me a ledger instead of the art supplies I had asked for. "People with money make the rules. People without money follow them. Which do you want to be?" That same year he began my financial education, which consisted primarily of showing me their investment portfolio and teaching me how to balance a checkbook. While other kids my age were playing with friends or developing hobbies, I was being taught about stocks, bonds, and real estate investments. "Pay attention," he would snap when my mind wandered during these lessons. "This is the only truly worthwhile skill I can teach you." While I excelled academically, particularly in mathematics, my achievements were never celebrated but expected. A perfect score meant I was doing my job. Anything less was a disappointment. Meanwhile, my mother's criticism of my appearance and social awkwardness was relentless. "Why can't you be more like Ashley Matthews?" she would ask, referring to a popular girl at school whose mother was in her social circle. "She knows how to dress and has so many friends. What's wrong with you?" What neither of my parents realized or perhaps cared about was that beneath my quiet exterior, I was observing everything, including the discrepancies in their financial situation. By 15, I had noticed the tension when bills arrived, the hushed arguments about credit card statements, and the way my father would sometimes sweat when writing checks for their extravagant purchases. One night while they were at a charity gala, I went into my father's home office, a forbidden zone I was never allowed to enter without permission. Curiosity had gotten the better of me after overhearing a heated argument about something called a second mortgage. What I discovered shocked me. Beneath the veneer of wealth and success, my parents were drowning in debt. Credit card statements showed balances in the tens of thousands. Mortgage documents revealed our home was leveraged to the hilt. Investment statements showed patterns of impulsive, high-risk trades that had lost substantial amounts. The revelation was both frightening and strangely liberating. The perfect, powerful parents who had made me feel inadequate for years were living a lie. Their apparent wealth, the foundation of their superiority, was built on quicksand. And somehow, at 15, I found that knowledge empowering. My 16th birthday came and went without celebration. Instead of a party like my classmates had, I received a lecture from my father about becoming an adult and taking responsibility. My mother added that I should be grateful they had given me so much. That night alone in my room, I made a decision that would change the trajectory of my life. I would learn everything about money that my father thought he knew but clearly didn't. The day after my 16th birthday, I walked to the public library after school instead of taking the bus directly home. My parents rarely tracked my whereabouts as long as my grades remained perfect, and I didn't cause them any embarrassment, so I had a precious window of freedom each afternoon. "I'd like some books on personal finance and investment, please," I asked the librarian, a kind-faced woman named Mrs. Peterson, who had always treated me with more warmth than my own mother. "School project?" she inquired with a smile. "Something like that," I replied, not wanting to explain the truth. She guided me to a section filled with books on budgeting, investing, and financial planning. I checked out 3 that seemed most accessible for beginners and hid them in my backpack before returning home. For the next several weeks, I devoured these books during lunch breaks and late at night after my parents had gone to bed. The more I read, the more I realized how precarious my parents' financial situation truly was. They were classic examples of what one book called high-income negative net worth individuals. They earned substantial money, but spent even more creating an unsustainable cycle that was bound to collapse eventually. One afternoon, while returning some books and checking out others, I noticed a flyer for a free financial literacy workshop being held at the library. The presenter was a woman named Mrs. Anderson, a retired financial planner who volunteered her time to teach basic money management skills. I decided to attend, telling my parents I was staying late for a school project. Mrs. Anderson was in her 60s with silver hair and bright, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through people. Her workshop was simple but eye-opening, covering fundamentals like emergency funds, debt management, and the power of compound interest. After most attendees had left, I approached her with specific questions that clearly surprised her coming from someone my age. "You have quite an understanding of finance for someone so young," she remarked. Where did this interest come from? Something about her genuine interest and lack of judgment made me open up about my home situation. Not everything, but enough for her to understand. "I see," she said thoughtfully. "Would you like to learn more beyond what these basic workshops cover?" That question led to a mentorship that would change my life. Mrs. Anderson began meeting with me weekly, guiding my financial education with patience and wisdom my parents had never shown. She taught me how to read financial statements, understand tax implications, and recognize the difference between good and bad debt. Most importantly, she showed me how financial knowledge could be a tool for empowerment rather than a weapon for control as my father had used it. Meanwhile, at home, I began noticing more signs of financial distress. Bills would arrive and be hidden away. Collection notices occasionally appeared in the mail. Once I overheard my father on the phone, his voice tense as he negotiated what sounded like an extension on a payment. With Mrs. Anderson's guidance, I started taking small steps toward financial independence. When my grandmother sent me $100 for my half-birthday, a tradition she had maintained despite my parents' eye-rolling instead of handing it over to my mother for safekeeping, as usual, I asked Mrs. Anderson to help me open a small investment account. "This is your money, Ella," she said firmly as we completed the paperwork. "Not your parents'. Remember that." By 17, my financial education had progressed significantly. I understood more about money management than most adults, certainly more than my parents seemed to. And then came the day I found the shut-off notice from the electric company carelessly left on the kitchen counter. This discovery led to another and another. My parents, for all their lectures about financial responsibility, were months behind on several utilities. Their credit cards were maxed out. Tax liens had been filed against our property. The perfect life they projected was a house of cards on the verge of collapse. That night I made a decision that in retrospect was both compassionate and foolish. Using the knowledge Mrs. Anderson had given me and the access to accounts I'd gleaned from documents in my father's office, I began quietly managing our household bills. I created spreadsheets, set up payment plans, negotiated with creditors using my mother's name, and established a system to ensure essential services remained connected. My parents, oblivious to what was happening, never questioned why the threatening letters had stopped. They continued their lavish lifestyle, still criticizing my every move, while remaining blind to the fact that their 17-year-old daughter was keeping their financial house of cards from toppling. "We've raised you to understand the value of money," my father pronounced at dinner one evening after describing how he'd just purchased a new luxury watch. "Not like these other kids who expect everything handed to them." I nodded quietly, thinking about the payment plan I'd arranged that afternoon for their overdue property taxes. The irony was painful and also oddly satisfying. I was developing a power they knew nothing about. As my high school graduation approached, I applied for every scholarship I could find. My perfect GPA and strong standardized test scores, combined with compelling essays about overcoming adversity, carefully worded to avoid directly exposing my parents, resulted in a full academic scholarship to Northwestern University's business program. At the graduation ceremony, my parents beamed with pride, accepting congratulations from other parents as if they had been supportive all along. "We always knew Ella was destined for greatness," my mother told anyone who would listen. "We focused on academic excellence from day one. Northwestern's business program is highly selective," my father added, "but we've prepared her well." I stood silently beside them, letting them take credit for accomplishments they had nothing to do with, knowing that my real education, both academic and life, was just beginning. My 18th birthday fell on a sweltering August day, just 2 weeks before I was scheduled to move into my dorm at Northwestern. I hadn't expected much celebration. Birthdays in our house were typically understated affairs centered around lectures about growing responsibility, but what transpired that day altered the course of my life forever. The morning began with an unusual tension in the air. My father was pacing in his home office, the door uncharacteristically ajar, while my mother sat at the kitchen island, a tumbler of amber liquid in hand despite the early hour. Neither acknowledged my birthday when I came downstairs. "Is everything okay?" I asked, preparing a simple breakfast for myself. "No, everything is not okay," my father snapped, emerging from his office with a sheaf of papers clutched in his fist. "The Westlake development deal has fallen through." The Westlake development was a real estate investment my father had been talking about for months, a sure thing that would solve all their financial problems. I had harbored doubts based on the research I'd secretly done, but kept them to myself. "What happened?" I asked cautiously. "The primary investor pulled out," he said, his face flushed with anger or embarrassment, perhaps both. "We're on the hook for the initial investment." "How much?" I asked, already dreading the answer. $200,000, my mother interjected, taking another sip from her glass. "Money we don't have." The implications hung in the air. $200,000 was an astronomical sum for a family already leveraged to the breaking point. My mind raced through the potential consequences: foreclosure on our home, bankruptcy, perhaps even legal trouble if there were investors expecting returns. "I might have a solution," my father said after a long silence, his eyes suddenly fixing on me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "Your college fund." "My college fund?" I repeated, confused. "But I have a full scholarship. I don't need a college fund." A strange look passed between my parents. "There's still housing, books, living expenses," my father continued. "You could live at home, commute to Northwestern. The scholarship covers tuition, but not everything else." "I've been awarded a housing scholarship too," I reminded him. "And I've saved enough from my part-time jobs for books and essentials." Another glance between my parents. This one longer and loaded with unspoken communication. "Ella," my mother said, setting down her glass, "what your father is trying to say is that we need to access your college fund to address this investment situation. Access my college fund? I repeated slowly. You mean use my college savings to bail out Dad's failed real estate deal? Don't take that tone, my father warned. This is a family emergency. We all need to make sacrifices. A cold realization washed over me. Can I see the statements for this college fund? I don't remember ever seeing any paperwork about it. The silence that followed confirmed my suspicion before either of them spoke. There have been some withdrawals over the years, my father finally admitted, for family necessities. You mean there is no college fund? I asked, my voice steady, despite the storm of emotions brewing inside. There never was. We intended to replace the money, my mother said defensively. But circumstances. What circumstances? I interrupted, uncharacteristically bold. The new car last year, the vacation to Bora Bora, the country club membership. You've benefited from our lifestyle too, young lady, my father said, his voice rising. Don't pretend you haven't enjoyed the privileges. What I would have enjoyed, I said carefully, was parents who actually saved for my education like they claimed instead of spending money they didn't have on appearances. My father's face darkened. This ungrateful attitude stops now. We need solutions, not accusations. What exactly are you asking me to do? I demanded. Defer college for a year, he said. Work full-time and contribute to the household. Help us get through this rough patch. The audacity of what they were suggesting struck me like a physical blow. After years of pressure to excel academically after earning a prestigious scholarship through my own hard work, they expected me to put my future on hold to rescue them from yet another financial mistake. No, I said, the single word falling like a stone between us. Excuse me, my father said, his voice dangerously quiet. I said no. I'm not deferring college. I'm not giving up my scholarship. And I'm certainly not responsible for bailing you out of this situation. My mother stood up abruptly, her drink sloshing over the rim of her glass. After everything we've done for you, what exactly have you done for me? I asked, genuine curiosity in my voice. Criticized me, belittled me, made me feel like I was never good enough. Or do you mean taking the money that was supposedly for my education and spending it on maintaining appearances? How dare you? My father thundered. We've given you everything, a roof over your head, food on the table, clothes on your back. The bare minimum required by law for parents, I pointed out. And even that came with constant reminders of how grateful I should be. The argument escalated rapidly, years of unspoken resentment suddenly finding voice. My father's face grew redder by the minute, while my mother's words became increasingly slurred as she refilled her glass. I maintained a calm exterior, even as their accusations became more outlandish and their demands more unreasonable. You know what your problem is, my father finally shouted, slamming his hand on the counter. You've never appreciated what you have. You've had every advantage, every opportunity. Like what? I challenged. The opportunity to manage this household's finances since I was 17, because you two couldn't be bothered. The advantage of lying awake at night wondering if our electricity would be shut off, because you spent the utility money on another lavish party. The stunned silence that followed told me I had revealed too much. What do you mean, managing the household finances? My father asked slowly. I could have backtracked, made up an explanation, but something inside me had broken free. The truth spilled out, how I had discovered their financial disarray, how I had been making arrangements with creditors, paying bills, and keeping their precarious financial situation from complete collapse for over a year. Instead of gratitude or even embarrassment, my revelation was met with outrage. You went through my private papers, my father bellowed. You contacted our creditors. Who do you think you are? The responsible one in this family, apparently. I answered, a lifetime of suppressed emotions finally breaking through. What followed was a blur of accusations. My father admitted to a gambling problem that had drained tens of thousands from their accounts. My mother's drinking, which I had long suspected but never confirmed was acknowledged as a daily habit, rather than an occasional indulgence. Family secrets tumbled out like toxic waste poisoning the air between us. And then came the words that would change everything. "We should never have taken you in," my mother screamed, mascara streaming down her face. "We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us." Taken me in. I repeated, my voice suddenly small. "Vivian, don't," my father warned, but it was too late. "You're just street trash we took in," she continued, gesturing wildly with her glass. "We gave you our name, our home, every opportunity, and you throw it back in our faces." The world seemed to stop. "What are you talking about?" My father sighed heavily, rubbing his face with his hands. "You're adopted, Ella. We adopted you as an infant. We weren't going to tell you this way, but you weren't going to tell me at all." I realized the pieces falling into place. The lack of baby pictures before age 1. The absence of resemblance to either parent. The times I'd overheard hushed conversations that stopped when I entered a room. Without another word, I walked to my father's office and began searching through his filing cabinets. Neither parent tried to stop me. In the back of the bottom drawer, I found a sealed envelope labeled Ella, Adoption Records. With trembling hands, I opened it and read the documents inside. I had indeed been adopted at 3 months old. My birth mother was named Sarah Miller, just 18 when she had me. There was no father listed on my original birth certificate. "Why?" I asked, returning to the kitchen with the papers clutched in my hand. "Why keep this from me?" "We were going to tell you when you were older," my father said weakly. "I'm 18 today," I pointed out. How much older did I need to be? It never seemed like the right time. My mother said, her anger seemingly deflated by the revelation. Or maybe, I suggested, the hurt crystallizing into clarity. "You used it as leverage. The ultimate thing to hold over me, even if I didn't know about it. I've always had to earn my place in this family, haven't I?" Neither denied it. "Well, now I know," I said, a strange calm settling over me. "And now I'm leaving." "Don't be dramatic," my father scoffed. "Where would you go? What would you do for money?" "I'll figure it out," I said, starting toward the stairs to pack my things. "People with money make the rules, right, Dad? People without money follow them. I think it's time I started making my own rules." What followed was chaos. As I packed a suitcase with essential clothing and the few meaningful possessions I owned, my parents' anger transformed into rage. They followed me from room to room, alternating between threats and manipulative appeals to family loyalty. "After everything we've done for you," became their refrain, as if taking in an unwanted child was an act of such extraordinary charity that it entitled them to a lifetime of control and obedience. By the time I dragged my suitcase downstairs, my father had moved from rage to cold calculation. "If you walk out that door," he said, blocking my path, "don't expect any financial support. No help with college, no car, no cell phone, nothing." "I never did," I replied, meeting his gaze steadily. My mother made one last drunken appeal. "You owe us everything, Ella. Everything. Where would you be if we hadn't taken you in some foster home on the streets?" "Maybe," I acknowledged. "Or maybe with someone who actually wanted a child to love, not a prop for their perfect family image." That was when they physically removed me from the house. My father grabbed my arm, my mother seized my suitcase, and together they propelled me toward the front door. "You ungrateful little bitch," my mother hissed, her perfectly maintained facade completely shattered. "You're just street trash," my father added, shoving me onto the porch. "And that's all you'll ever be." The door slammed behind me, followed by the decisive click of the deadbolt. I stood there in shock, the weight of what had just happened settling over me like a heavy blanket. 18 years old, suddenly homeless with nothing but a suitcase and the knowledge that the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally never had. But as I walked down the driveway toward an uncertain future, one thought sustained me. They had no idea that I still controlled every bill, every account, every financial aspect of their lives. And with a few keystrokes, I could bring their house of cards tumbling down. That first night was the hardest. I sat in my old Honda Civic, the one possession truly in my name purchased with my own savings from years of babysitting and tutoring, and tried to process everything that had happened. The revelation of my adoption, the vicious words my parents had hurled at me, the sudden homelessness, it was overwhelming. I drove to a 24-hour diner near campus and nursed a cup of coffee until dawn, making lists and plans in a notebook. My situation was dire but not hopeless. I had my scholarship to Northwestern. I had about $3,000 saved in an account my parents knew nothing about. I had my car. Most importantly, I had knowledge and skills that many people my age lacked. When the library opened, I went directly to find Mrs. Anderson. Her face registered shock when I explained what had happened, followed quickly by determination. "You'll stay with me," she announced without hesitation. "I have a spare bedroom that's just gathering dust. You can stay there until you move into your dorm." "I couldn't impose," I began. "Nonsense," she interrupted. "It's not imposing when it's offered freely. This is what real family does, Ella. They help each other without keeping score." Those words, real family, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. In a single day, I had lost the only family I'd ever known and found out they had never truly been mine to begin with. Mrs. Anderson's simple kindness was a lifeline I desperately needed. The 2 weeks before dorm move-in passed in a blur of activity. I took a job at a coffee shop near campus, working as many shifts as they would give me. I met with Northwestern's financial aid office to explain my changed circumstances and secure additional support. I opened a new cell phone account and changed all my passwords to ensure my parents couldn't access my information. And then there was the matter of my parents' finances. For over a year, I had been the invisible hand keeping their financial house of cards from collapsing. I had set up automatic payments, negotiated with creditors, and created systems to ensure bills were paid on time despite their chaotic spending. With a few keystrokes, I could dismantle all of it. The temptation to do so immediately was strong. The hurt and anger from their rejection burned like acid in my chest. But something held me back. Not love or loyalty, but a sense that such an action should be deliberate rather than reactive. "They have no idea how dependent they are on me," I told Mrs. Anderson one evening as we shared dinner. "They think they've thrown out an ungrateful child, not the person keeping their whole financial life afloat." "And what will you do with that knowledge?" she asked thoughtfully. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "Part of me wants to cut everything off immediately, let them deal with the consequences. But another part feels responsible still," she finished for me. "That's understandable, Ella. But remember, you didn't create their problems, and you're not obligated to solve them, especially now." Her wisdom helped me reach a decision. I wouldn't abruptly cut off the systems I had created. That felt too much like the vindictive reaction they might expect. Instead, I would gradually reduce my involvement, documenting everything carefully along the way. If they figured out what was happening and reached out with genuine remorse, perhaps there could be a path forward. If not, they would have to face the consequences of their own actions. Moving into my dorm was a bittersweet experience. Around me, other freshmen were accompanied by proud parents' cars packed with dorm supplies and home-cooked meals for the mini-fridges. I arrived alone with my meager possessions, acutely aware of how different my situation was. My roommate Zoe arrived with her mom, stepdad, and younger brother, all of whom helped set up her side of the room with coordinated bedding, string lights, and framed family photos. When they realized I was alone, Zoe's mom immediately took me under her wing. "We brought extra command hooks, storage bins, and snacks," she said warmly. "And we're heading to Target after lunch. You're coming with us, no arguments." That afternoon, shopping with Zoe's family was my first glimpse of what healthy family dynamics could look like. They teased each other affectionately, respected each other's opinions, and treated me, a complete stranger, with genuine kindness. By the time they left, our dorm room was cozy and functional, and I had exchanged phone numbers with Zoe's mom, who insisted I call her if I needed anything. "Family isn't just blood," she told me with a hug as they prepared to leave. It's who shows up for you. As classes began, I threw myself into my studies with the same intensity I'd always had, but now there was an additional motivation: survival. My scholarship covered tuition and housing, but everything else depended on careful budgeting and my part-time jobs. I worked at the coffee shop 5 mornings a week before class picked up tutoring gigs in the afternoons and took weekend shifts at the campus bookstore. Despite this grueling schedule, I maintained perfect grades in my business and finance courses. Professors began to notice my exceptional understanding of financial concepts, often asking me to help struggling classmates. One professor, Dr. Williams, took a particular interest in my progress. "You have an unusual maturity about financial matters," he observed after I aced his midterm exam. "Most freshmen struggle with these concepts, but you seem to have practical experience already." That conversation led to an opportunity to work as a peer financial advisor through the university's Student Services Center. The position paid better than my other jobs and aligned perfectly with my skills and interests. By the end of my freshman year, I had established myself as one of the most sought-after financial advisors on campus, helping fellow students navigate financial aid, create budgets, and understand credit. Throughout this time, I continued to monitor my parents' financial situation from afar. As planned, I gradually reduced my involvement, documenting everything meticulously. I watched as late fees began to accumulate when payments weren't made on time. I noted which accounts fell behind first. I tracked the mounting consequences of their financial mismanagement now that I wasn't there to mitigate the damage. They made no attempt to contact me. No calls, no emails, not even to check if I was alive and safe. Their silence confirmed what I had already known but had been unwilling to fully accept. I had never really been their daughter, just an accessory to the perfect life they wanted to project. The revelation was painful, but ultimately liberating. If I wasn't their daughter, I wasn't obligated to save them from themselves. If they had thrown me away so easily, I owed them nothing. And with that realization, I felt the last threads of guilt and obligation begin to unravel. By the end of my freshman year, I had created a new life for myself. I had friends who valued me for who I was, not how I made them look. I had mentors who recognized my potential and encouraged my growth. I had a clear path forward that didn't depend on anyone's approval but my own. And as I watched from a distance, my parents' carefully constructed facade began to crumble, one unpaid bill at a time. My junior year at Northwestern marked a turning point in my life. After 2 years of juggling multiple jobs while maintaining perfect grades, I had finally achieved a measure of financial stability. My role as a campus financial advisor had expanded to include managing the entire peer advisory program, which came with a substantial stipend. My reputation had led to private clients, mainly professors and staff who sought my advice on personal financial matters. I had moved out of the dorms and into a small but comfortable apartment with Zoe, who had become my closest friend. Our place was nothing like the luxury home I'd grown up in, but it was warm, welcoming, and, most importantly, paid for with honestly earned money. My academic performance had caught the attention of several prestigious financial firms, leading to an internship offer from Goldman Sachs for the summer between junior and senior year. The opportunity was beyond anything I could have imagined when I was sleeping in my car that first night after being thrown out. "You've built something remarkable," Mrs. Anderson told me during one of our regular lunch meetings. Now in her late 60s, she remained my most trusted advisor and the closest thing to a parent I had. "Most people twice your age haven't accomplished what you have in these 3 years." "I had good teachers," I replied, squeezing her hand gratefully. It was during this period of hard-won stability that my parents finally reached out. The email arrived on a Tuesday afternoon as I was finishing a financial counseling session with a freshman who had maxed out 3 credit cards. From Robert Hamilton. Subject: Family Matter, Ella. "Your mother and I would like to meet with you to discuss reconciliation. It's been 3 years and family should not remain estranged. Please contact us to arrange a convenient time. No apology. No acknowledgement of what they had done. No inquiry about how I had fared after being thrown out. Just an expectation that I would drop everything because they had decided it was time to reconcile. I showed the email to Zoe that evening. "Wow," she said after reading it. "That's some world-class audacity right there." "I'm not sure whether to respond or just delete it," I admitted. "What do you want to do?" she asked, always practical. "Part of me wants to ignore it completely," I said. "But another part is curious about why they're reaching out now after 3 years of silence." I decided to respond with a brief neutral email asking why they wanted to meet after so much time had passed. Their reply came within minutes, suggesting they were waiting anxiously for my response. From Robert Hamilton. Subject: Family matter. We've had time to reflect on past misunderstandings. We believe it's important to mend family relationships. Your mother has been unwell, and we both feel it's time to put the past behind us. We could meet for lunch at the Capitol Grill on Saturday. Again, no real acknowledgement of what had happened, just a vague reference to misunderstandings, as if they hadn't called me street trash and physically removed me from their home on my 18th birthday. After consulting with Mrs. Anderson and my therapist, whom I had started seeing to process the abandonment issues stemming from both my adoption and subsequent rejection, I agreed to meet them more out of curiosity than any desire for reconciliation. The Capitol Grill was exactly the kind of high-end restaurant my parents favored, expensive, exclusive, and designed to impress. I arrived deliberately early and chose a table in a quiet corner where we wouldn't be overheard. When they walked in, the sight of them was jarring. 3 years had changed them significantly. My father, once commanding and physically imposing, looked diminished. His designer suit hung loosely on his frame, and his hair had thinned considerably. My mother, who had built her identity around her youthful appearance, had aged dramatically. The careful makeup couldn't hide the deep lines around her eyes and mouth, nor the unhealthy pallor beneath her blush. "Ella," my mother said, her voice wavering slightly as they approached the table. "You look well." "Thank you," I replied, not returning the platitude because it would have been a lie. "Please sit down." An awkward silence followed as they settled into their chairs. A waiter approached to take drink orders. Water for me, scotch for my father, and white wine for my mother, despite the early hour. "So," I said once the waiter had left, "you wanted to meet?" My father cleared his throat. "Yes, well, it's been a long time, and we thought, that is, your mother and I felt it was time to put the past behind us." "What exactly does that mean to you?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Family should be together," my mother interjected. "These years of separation have been difficult for all of us." "Have they?" I inquired, genuinely curious about their perspective. "I haven't heard from either of you since you threw me out and called me street trash. Not a call, not a text, not even an email to see if I was safe or had a place to sleep." They exchanged uncomfortable glances. "We assumed you had gone to your Aunt Patricia's," my father said defensively. "Or to that woman from the library you were always talking about." "Mrs. Anderson," I supplied. "And yes, she did take me in. A virtual stranger showed me more compassion than my own parents." "We were angry," my mother said, taking a large sip of her wine. "You have to understand, Ella. The things you said that day were the truth," I finished for her. "I pointed out that you had spent my college fund, that you were financially irresponsible, and that you had hidden my adoption from me for 18 years. All facts, not accusations." Another uncomfortable silence descended on the table. "We didn't come here to rehash old arguments," my father finally said. "We came to reconcile." "Why now?" I asked directly. "Why after 3 years of silence?" They exchanged another glance, and suddenly I understood. This wasn't about reconciliation at all. "You need money," I stated flatly. My father's face flushed. "That's not—" "Don't lie to me," I interrupted. "Not again. Just tell me the truth for once." After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. "Yes, we're facing some financial difficulties, but that's not the only reason we wanted to see you." "What kind of difficulties?" I pressed. The story emerged gradually pieced together from their reluctant admissions and what I already knew from my continued monitoring of their accounts. My father's gambling had escalated from a problematic habit to a full-blown addiction. He had taken out loans from people who didn't use conventional banking to collect their debts. My mother's drinking had progressed to the point where she needed medical intervention, but their insurance wouldn't cover the treatment facility she wanted. Their house, the showcase home that had been the centerpiece of their carefully constructed image, was 3 months away from foreclosure. Credit card companies had closed their accounts and were pursuing legal action for unpaid balances. The IRS had placed liens against their remaining assets for unpaid taxes. In short, the financial house of cards had finally collapsed completely. "We thought, given your position at that investment bank, you might be able to help," my father concluded, the real purpose of the meeting finally revealed. A loan to get us back on our feet. Family helping family. I sat in stunned silence, absorbing the audacity of what they were asking. After throwing me out after years of no contact, they expected me to bail them out of problems entirely of their own making. "Let me make sure I understand," I said carefully. "You want me, the street trash you threw out 3 years ago, to use my hard-earned money to rescue you from gambling debts and unpaid taxes." "Don't be dramatic, Ella," my mother sighed. "We were all emotional that day. Things were said in the heat of the moment. Things that revealed how you truly felt," I pointed out. "And now you want my help because what blood is thicker than water." "You are our daughter," my father insisted. "Am I?" I asked. "Because 3 years ago you made it very clear that I was just someone you took in, not your real daughter." "Of course you're our daughter," my mother said, reaching for my hand across the table. I pulled back before she could touch me. "We adopted you. We raised you. That makes you ours." "No," I said firmly. "It made me your responsibility until I turned 18. It never made me your possession." I took a deep breath, centering myself before continuing. "Did you know I found my birth mother?" The shock on their faces answered that question. "Her name is Sarah Miller. She lives in Milwaukee now. She was 18 when she had me, a freshman in college with no resources to raise a child on her own. She made the hardest decision of her life to give me up for adoption because she wanted me to have opportunities she couldn't provide." My mother's face had gone pale. "You contacted her without telling us." "Why would I tell you?" I asked genuinely. "You made it clear I wasn't part of your family anymore. Besides, she's been more of a mother to me in the past 2 years than you were in 18. 2 years, my father repeated. "You've known her for 2 years. I nodded. "I found her during my freshman year. We've been building a relationship ever since. I have half-siblings too, a brother and a sister. They're wonderful." The revelation seemed to shake them deeply. Perhaps they had assumed I would remain untethered after they discarded me with no family connections to replace what they had taken away. "I don't understand why you're telling us this," my father finally said. "Because I want you to understand that family isn't about legal documents or shared last names," I explained. "It's about love, respect, and mutual support. Sarah gave me up because she wanted what was best for me, even at great personal cost. You took me in but never truly accepted me, and then threw me away when I wouldn't sacrifice my future for your financial mistakes." My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Marcus, a classmate who had become a close friend and was meeting me after lunch to study for an upcoming exam. "I need to go soon," I said, gathering my belongings. "But before I do, I want to be very clear about something. I will not be giving you money. Not a loan, not a gift, nothing. The financial problems you're facing are the direct result of your own choices, and solving them is your responsibility, not mine. After everything we did for you," my father began, his face darkening with anger. "Save it," I interrupted. "That line stopped working on me the day you threw me out. You did the legal minimum required of parents, and you did it conditionally. That doesn't entitle you to anything from me now." I stood up, leaving enough cash on the table to cover my water and a generous tip for the server. I've been managing your household finances since I was 17. I said, delivering the final blow. For the past 3 years, I've been gradually removing myself from that role, documenting everything along the way. I have records of every account, every payment, every financial decision that led you to this point. None of this is a surprise to me. The color drained from my father's face as the implications of what I was saying sank in. You've been monitoring our finances, he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes, I confirmed. Initially out of a misplaced sense of responsibility. Later to protect myself from any attempts to use my identity for new credit, which, by the way, I discovered you had done when I was 16. My mother gasped. We never. The Macy's card, I reminded her. The one you opened in my name for my emergency use, but somehow always maxed out before I ever saw it. I've spent years repairing the credit damage you caused. I shouldered my bag and looked at them one last time. Goodbye. Please don't contact me again unless you're ready to offer a genuine apology and acknowledgement of the harm you've caused. And to be clear, that would only open the door to a conversation, not to financial support. As I walked away, my father called after me, his voice a mixture of desperation and anger. You can't just cut us off. We're your parents. I turned back briefly. You're just street trash, I replied calmly, throwing his own words back at him. And that's all you'll ever be. It wasn't kind. It wasn't mature. But as I walked out of that restaurant, leaving them to face the consequences of their actions without my intervention, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. The confrontation at the Capitol Grill marked both an ending and a beginning. As I walked away from my parents that day, I also walked away from the last vestiges of guilt and obligation that had kept me tethered to their toxic influence. The path ahead was entirely my own to shape. My internship at Goldman Sachs that summer exceeded all expectations. I thrived in the fast-paced environment, impressing senior executives with both my technical knowledge and emotional intelligence. By the end of the summer, I had received a job offer for after graduation with a starting salary that seemed almost unreal to someone who had been homeless just 3 years earlier. You've earned this, Mrs. Anderson told me when I shared the news, her eyes bright with pride. Every bit of it. My final year at Northwestern passed in a blur of senior seminars, job preparations, and deepening relationships with the chosen family I had built. Zoe and I had added Marcus to our apartment, turning the living room into a third bedroom to save on costs. The three of us formed a tight-knit unit, supporting each other through finals, job interviews, and the occasional heartbreak. My relationship with my birth mother, Sarah, and my half-siblings continued to grow. They had welcomed me into their lives with an openness and warmth that still sometimes caught me off guard. Sarah never tried to replace the mother I had lost, or perhaps never truly had, but offered a different kind of maternal relationship based on mutual respect and genuine affection. I gave you up because I wanted you to have more than I could provide, she told me during one of our weekend visits. Seeing the amazing woman you've become, I know it was the right decision, even though it broke my heart. Her honesty about the adoption, the circumstances, the difficulty of the decision, her years of wondering about me, was healing in ways I hadn't anticipated. There was no pretense, no rewriting of history, just authentic communication between two adults with a profound connection. Meanwhile, my parents continued their downward spiral. I maintained my distance but kept track of major developments through public records and the occasional update from mutual acquaintances. Their home was foreclosed upon, forcing them to move to a small apartment in a less prestigious neighborhood. My father faced legal troubles related to his gambling debts, narrowly avoiding criminal charges through some legal maneuvering by former colleagues who took pity on him. My mother had been through rehab twice with limited success each time. They made several more attempts to contact me, increasingly desperate emails, voicemails, even a letter delivered to my apartment. Each communication focused on their needs, their suffering, their expectations of my help. None contained a genuine acknowledgement of the harm they had caused, or an apology that wasn't immediately followed by a request for money. I did not respond, Instead, I focused on building something positive from the financial knowledge that had initially been a tool of survival. During my senior year, I developed a business plan for a financial advisory firm specifically targeting young adults from disadvantaged backgrounds. The concept combined traditional financial services with education mentorship and community support. Most financial advisors cater to people who already have wealth, I explained to Dr. Williams, who had become a valued mentor. I want to help people who need to create wealth from nothing, who don't have family resources or connections to fall back on. He helped me refine the plan and introduced me to potential investors who shared my vision. By graduation, I had secured enough seed funding to launch my business immediately rather than taking the Goldman Sachs position. First Generation Financial opened its doors in a modest office space near Northwestern's campus 2 months after I received my diploma. We started small, just me, a part-time administrative assistant, and a rotating schedule of volunteer financial educators from local banks and investment firms. Our initial client base consisted mainly of recent graduates and young professionals referred by professors who knew my story. The business model was innovative sliding scale fees, based on income-free educational workshops open to the community, and a matching savings program that incentivized clients to build emergency funds. For those who couldn't afford any fees, we offered pro bono services in exchange for community volunteer hours. Within a year, we had expanded to a staff of 5 and moved to a larger office. By the end of the second year, we had opened a second location in Chicago's South Side, deliberately positioning ourselves in a community underserved by traditional financial institutions. As the business grew, so did my personal wealth and influence. I was featured in local business publications, invited to speak at conferences on financial literacy, and asked to consult on community development initiatives. The frightened 18-year-old who had slept in her car was now a respected business owner, making a tangible difference in her community. It was during this period of professional success and personal fulfillment that my parents made their most dramatic attempt at reconnection. They showed up at my office unannounced one Tuesday afternoon, somehow having talked their way past the receptionist. "Ella," my father said, standing in my office doorway, looking older and more disheveled than I had ever seen him. "We need to talk." My mother stood beside him, a shadow of her former polished self. Her hands trembled slightly, and she had the hollow-eyed look of someone barely holding themselves together. "You can't just show up at my workplace," I said firmly, rising from my desk. "This is inappropriate and unprofessional." "We had no choice," my father insisted. "You've ignored all our attempts to contact you." "Because I made it clear I didn't want further communication unless it began with a genuine apology," I reminded him. "Something you've been unwilling or unable to provide." "Is that what you want?" my mother asked, her voice brittle. "An apology." "Fine. We're sorry. Now can we please discuss our situation?" The insincerity of her words was almost laughable. "That's not an apology," I said. "That's a transaction. You're offering words you think I want to hear in exchange for something you want from me." My father's facade of civility cracked. "This is ridiculous. We are facing criminal charges, Ella. The IRS has filed tax evasion charges. We could go to prison." This was new information, but not entirely surprising given what I knew of their financial practices over the years. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, I took no pleasure in their suffering. "But I don't see how it involves me." "We need money for legal representation," my mother explained. "Your father's former colleagues won't help anymore. We've exhausted all other options." "So once again you've come to me as a last resort," I observed. "Not because you value me as your daughter or regret how you treated me, but because you've run out of people to exploit." "That's not fair," my father protested weakly. "Isn't it?" I challenged. "In the 7 years since you threw me out, have you ever once reached out just to see how I was doing? To express genuine remorse for your actions? To take responsibility for the harm you caused?" Their silence was answer enough. "I built this company to help people take control of their financial lives," I said, gesturing around my office. We work with clients who are willing to make difficult changes to learn from past mistakes, to do the hard work of creating stability. We don't enable destructive behaviors or bail out people who refuse to address the root causes of their problems. "We're your parents," my mother said, as if that single fact outweighed everything else. "Biology and legal documents don't make a family," I replied. "Actions do. And your actions have consistently shown that you see me as a resource to exploit, not a person to love." My father's expression hardened. "So that's it. You'll let us go to prison because of some perceived slights from years ago. Throwing your 18-year-old daughter out onto the street and calling her street trash isn't a slight," I corrected him. "It's abuse. And yes, I will let you face the consequences of your own actions, just as I had to face the consequences of yours when you abandoned me." I pressed the intercom button on my desk. "Melissa, could you please come escort Mr. and Mrs. Hamilton out? And in the future, they are not to be admitted to the building." As security arrived to remove them, my mother made one last desperate appeal. "We're family. Ella blood is thicker than water." "That's not even the correct quote," I said as they were led away. "The full proverb is, 'The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb.' It means the exact opposite of how you're using it, that the bonds we choose are stronger than those we're born into. And I've chosen my family. You're not part of it." Their removal from my office was the last time I saw them in person. I later learned through public records that my father received a suspended sentence and probation for tax evasion, while my mother was required to complete another rehabilitation program. Their financial situation continued to deteriorate, eventually forcing them to move in with a distant relative in Florida. I felt no satisfaction in their downfall, only a sad recognition that they had created their own fate through years of poor choices and mistreatment of others. The dynasty they had been so proud of, the Hamilton name that was supposed to open doors and command respect, had crumbled under the weight of their own actions. Meanwhile, my chosen family continued to grow and flourish. I married Tyler, a kind and supportive man I met through a community service project who understood my past without letting it define me. Sarah, my birth mother, walked me down the aisle alongside Mrs. Anderson, the two women who had shown me what maternal love truly looked like. My half-siblings Jordan and Lily were enthusiastic participants in the wedding, genuinely happy to see their once unknown sister find happiness. Zoe was my maid of honor, and Marcus gave a toast that brought happy tears to everyone's eyes. The night before the wedding, I received an email from my parents, somehow having obtained my new personal address. It contained no congratulations, no well wishes, only a complaint that they had not been invited, and a reminder that real family should be present for important life events. I showed the email to Tyler, who had become my partner in all things, including navigating the complicated emotions surrounding my biological and adoptive families. "What do you want to do?" he asked, as he always did when difficult decisions arose respecting my agency and autonomy. "Nothing," I decided after careful consideration. "They haven't earned a place at our wedding. They haven't done the work to be part of my life." He nodded, understanding without judgment. "Your family will be there," he said, referring to the chosen family we had both come to value above biological connections. "The people who love you for who you are, not what you can do for them." On our wedding day, surrounded by people who genuinely cared for my well-being, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with forgiveness and everything to do with growth. I had taken the painful lessons of my childhood and used them to build something beautiful, a life of purpose, a network of authentic relationships, and a business that helped others avoid the financial traps that had ensnared my parents. My adoptive parents did show up uninvited to the reception, creating a scene that was quickly handled by friends who understood the situation. They were escorted out before I had to interact with them, their final attempt at insertion into my life as unsuccessful as all their previous efforts. "Are you okay?" Tyler asked afterward, his concern evident. Yes, I realized, and it was true. They can't hurt me anymore. They have no power over me. And that was perhaps the greatest victory of all. Not the successful business, not the loving marriage, not even the chosen family that surrounded me with genuine support. The true triumph was my freedom from the toxic patterns that had defined my early life, my ability to set boundaries and maintain them even in the face of manipulation and guilt. I had cut off their financial support, yes, but more importantly, I had cut off their ability to define my worth, to determine my place in the world, to make me feel like street trash, undeserving of love and respect. In doing so, I hadn't just survived. I had thrived, building a life that honored the resilient spirit that had carried me through those darkest days. 5 years have passed since that wedding day confrontation. My company, First Generation Financial, has expanded to 7 locations across 3 states, helping thousands of young people build financial security and break generational cycles of poverty and debt. We've received national recognition for our innovative approach to financial literacy and community investment. Tyler and I have welcomed 2 children, a daughter Grace and a son Leo, who are growing up surrounded by love and stability. We've created the childhood for them that I never had, one where they know their worth isn't tied to achievements or appearances, where they are valued simply for being themselves. Sarah, my birth mother, is a devoted grandmother who visits, often bringing homemade cookies and boundless affection. Mrs. Anderson, now in her 70s but still sharp as ever, is Grandma Ellen to my children, sharing her wisdom and gentle guidance. My half-siblings, now young adults themselves, are regular fixtures in our home, creating the kind of extended family bonds I once thought were only possible in movies. I've channeled my experiences into something larger than myself. The Hamilton Foundation, reclaiming the name on my terms, provides scholarships and mentoring for adopted children and those in foster care. We focus particularly on helping these young people prepare for the transition to adulthood, ensuring they have the financial knowledge and emotional support to thrive independently. As for my adoptive parents, I maintain my boundaries while no longer actively monitoring their situation. The last I heard, they were living in a retirement community in Florida, their financial circumstances greatly reduced from the luxury they once enjoyed. My father's health has declined significantly, a combination of age and the consequences of years of stress and unhealthy habits. My mother, according to mutual acquaintances, has finally achieved sobriety, though the damage from decades of alcohol abuse has taken its toll. They continue to make occasional attempts at contact, cards on birthdays, emails during holidays, once even a phone call that I didn't answer. The tone has shifted over the years from demanding to pleading, from entitled to desperate. Sometimes there are hints of genuine regret buried beneath the self-pity, but never the full acknowledgement and accountability that would be necessary for any kind of reconciliation. I've come to understand that they may never be capable of the self-reflection required to truly recognize the harm they caused. Their generation, their upbringing, and their own unresolved traumas created people who see relationships as transactions, love as conditional, and children as extensions of themselves rather than independent beings deserving of respect. This understanding doesn't excuse their behavior, but it helps me view them with compassion rather than anger. I no longer need their approval or their remorse to feel complete. The broken pieces of my childhood have been transformed into something stronger and more beautiful through the Japanese art of kintsugi, the practice of repairing broken pottery with gold, highlighting the breaks rather than hiding them. My breaks, my wounds, my challenges, they're all part of the golden seams that make me who I am today. A business owner, a mentor, a wife, a mother, a daughter to the women who earned that title through love rather than biology, a sister, a friend. Sometimes I think about that 18-year-old girl sleeping in her car, terrified but determined. I wish I could tell her that the road ahead would be difficult, but ultimately rewarding beyond anything she could imagine. That the family who threw her away did her a favor, freeing her to create connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation. That the financial knowledge her father taught as a tool of control would become her greatest asset in building independence. The irony isn't lost on me that in cutting off my parents' financial support, both the direct management of their accounts and my refusal to bail them out of their self-created problems, I was actually giving them the opportunity to face reality and perhaps grow from it. Whether they took that opportunity was up to them, just as my response to being discarded was up to me. I chose to build rather than destroy to create, rather than resent to thrive, rather than merely survive. Not because I'm inherently stronger or better than my parents, but because I was fortunate enough to find people like Mrs. Anderson, Sarah Zoe Marcus, and eventually Tyler. People who showed me what healthy relationships look like, who supported me without expecting obedience in return, who loved me for who I was, rather than what I could do for them. That's the message I share with the young people who come through our programs, many of whom have their own stories of family rejection or financial abandonment. Your past doesn't define your future. The family you create can be stronger than the family you were born or adopted into. Financial independence is a powerful form of self-protection. And sometimes walking away from toxic relationships is the greatest act of self-love possible. Have you ever had to make the difficult decision to cut ties with family for your own well-being, or create boundaries that others didn't respect? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories of resilience and transformation, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose yourself sometimes. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, you're never just street trash. You're valuable, worthy of respect, and capable of building a beautiful life on your own terms.